Hi, I'm Rhiannon from the Epsom Bakehouse, and thanks for joining me today. We're going to be baking some delicious bread. Now, you might be thinking, goodness, bread baking, that takes forever. You've got to mix all your ingredients, knead them, and there's all this technical stuff like leaving it to rise and shaping it and making sure you've got it at the right temperature. And then you've got to bake it and make sure that you get a really great baker in your loaf. That can be true in some aspects of bread making, but I love to be able to show people how to bake bread that's really quick and easy as well in their kitchen. So you can do that with me today. We'll be baking some delicious flatbreads, and you only need 2 simple ingredients to make them. So let's get started and bake along with me. So the 2 ingredients that you'll need for these flatbreads are flour and also some plain yogurt. So just say Greek yogurt, plain natural yogurt is all you'll need. You might also want to have a little bit of olive oil, because instead of baking these breads in the oven, we're actually going to cook them on the hob. So have a frying pan ready. Flour I'm using is self-raising wheat flour. So if you don't have self-raising and you're using plain flour, then you'll also need to add in a teaspoon or so of baking powder for every 100 grams of flour that you're using. You can actually decide how much of these breads you want to make as well. All you need to do is add equal amounts of the flour and the yogurt together. So in this case, I'm going to be using 100 grams of the self-raising flour and 100 grams of the yogurt. And that will probably make 4 or 5 small flatbreads. So if you want to make more, obviously do increase your amount. These really are a simple flatbread, and if you are baking along with me, I'd love to see what you make at the end. So I've already weighed out 100 grams of the self-raising flour into this bowl. And then all I'm going to do is simply add 100 grams of the yogurt into the bowl. So once I've got those ingredients into the bowl, it's a simple action of just mixing them together until they form a dough. So you might find that you end up having to put your hands in to clump together the ball of dough. So use a spoon to mix together until you've got a ball of dough. It will be quite sticky. You might want to just reach in occasionally, scrape off whatever you're using to mix with so that you get all of that yogurt absorbed into the flour. And just keep mixing until there's no dry flour remaining. This is a really simple recipe, and it does produce some really amazing tasting flatbreads. But you could also add in some flavourings if you wish. So even just a pinch of salt, or perhaps some dried herbs or spices. You can add them in with the flour and mix them into the dough. But if you don't want to do that, absolutely fine. Go ahead and make these as is, just the flour and yogurt. They will taste really lovely. So once you've got a ball of dough out on the work surface, you can just roughly divide it. If you're doing it the amounts I suggested, 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water, you can just divide that into roughly 4 or 5 small pieces. So you can either judge that by eye, or it'll be about 50 or less grams, depending if you do 4 or 5, 50 grams per piece of dough. So I'm just going to cut mine up roughly into pieces of dough. Now, I've got a little bit of flour on the work surface just off to one side. I'm not putting it on the main dough. I don't want to dry it out too much. But you could just keep it to one side if it's getting really sticky. When we're about to roll these out, you might just need a little bit of flour. So once I've divided up the pieces of dough, I'm literally just going to roll these out, as I said, with a little bit of flour. And we're going to roll them out to about just under a centimetre thick. So relatively thin. Remember, we're going to cook these on the hob, so you want them to cook through easily, so nothing too thick. You can probably see there, nothing too thick, probably about 1/2 to 1 centimetre thick. So carry on and roll out all the pieces of your dough. Once you've rolled out all your pieces of dough, then you'll just need to gently brush a little bit of olive oil onto each side of the piece of dough. Remember, these are going into the pan, so just a bit of olive oil. We're going to keep the pan dry and just keep the oil on the pieces of flatbread. So I'm literally just wiping a bit of olive oil or vegetable oil onto each side of the flatbread. Once you've got your breads rolled out and your individual pieces, it is time to start cooking. It really is that quick. So heat up a pan on the hob. Now you'll remember I'm doing this over a relatively low heat. And you'll remember that we put the oil onto the surface of the pieces of bread rather than in the pan. So once the pan is hot, very carefully, you might want to use tongs for this, pop your breads into the pan, and you might be able to hear them start to sizzle a little bit. So we're going to do a few minutes on each side. You might want to keep checking them, but we're looking for them to puff up slightly. Now you've got that rising agent you have in the self-raising flour. You've got a rising agent already that will cause the breads to puff up as they cook. Or if you were using plain flour, then put in that baking powder to make sure you get that puffiness on your breads. And they should leave them side down, obviously not unattended. Don't let them burn. That will happen relatively quickly, but give them a good minute or so on that side. And we're looking to get a really lovely dark brown caramelization on the outside of the bread. So they get this beautiful dark brown colour. You'll start to smell that delicious smell of bread baking in the pan. And these are really great breads. They're really versatile. So you could just be serving them for lunch with a salad, or maybe for a heartier meal with a stew or curry, perhaps with dips. They go with so many different things. It's a really great way to eat some delicious bread really quickly, and you can just make it just like that in the kitchen. Also, if you want to get kids involved, they can do mixing the dough up from the flour and yogurt, and then break it up and shape it, roll it out for you before you cook it. So I've just turned that over after a minute or so, and you might be able to see that there's going to get some caramelization on the outside of that one. We want it to go a bit darker than that, so I'm going to keep on turning these and checking they don't burn, keeping them over low to medium heat. And remember, the oil is on the outside of the bread, so keep turning them, and we're going to wait for them to bake through. And if you've got a bit of a production line going, you might want to have a plate to one side ready to put your cooked flatbreads on once they're finished, and they can cool down before you eat them. So as you can see, after a few minutes in the pan on a good heat, you get this beautiful caramelization on the outside of your bread. And it smells absolutely amazing, and for something made so quickly, it really is delicious. When you break one apart, it should be nice and fluffy on the inside. A little bit of steam coming out there. Really fluffy on the inside, and that's because you've added in the yogurt as well, and the fats help make this softer dough that's really delicious and adds some flavour in. So that will be the end. Once your breads are cooled, you can go and enjoy them. And they will be best eaten when they're made fresh. So do enjoy them, make as many as you need, and you can come back and make some more really easily. If you haven't added any flavour in with your bread, such as dried herbs or spices, you could obviously eat these with dips or some butter or things like garlic butter. So they're really versatile and a great bread to just enjoy with any meal, really. So I hope you've enjoyed baking, or rather frying along with me today, and making these delicious flatbreads. I'd love to see what you've made, having followed along with this video. You can tag the Epsom Bakehouse in any pictures you put on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'd love to hear what you made, and do check out more of these baking videos. You can find this and much more bread making tips on my blog on theepsombakehouse.co.uk/blog. Lots of bread making tips, recipes, things that you can get involved with if you want to bake more bread at home. I hope you've enjoyed today, finding out you can bake great bread in your kitchen in a matter of minutes with 2 simple ingredients. Do go and enjoy.